right, so for today's deep dive, we're looking at a really challenging sociological report on mass shootings in the U.S. And right away, the authors argue that the usual conversations about mental illness and gun control are, in their words, lazy assessments.
They really do. Their main claim is they posit that the violence is structurally rooted in what they call the insatiable ego of the white male.
This God complex, as they call it.
Exactly. And it's conditioned by these very specific societal narratives about entitlement. So for you listening, we're going to unpack that idea, this so-called God complex, what builds it, and the solution they propose.
Okay, so let's start with that foundation. How does the report actually define this white God complex?
Well, they say the white male is socially constructed to see himself as the architect, judge, and ultimate protagonist of the entire American story. And that constant messaging, creates what they call the insatiable ego, which is just bloated with this expectation of unearned privilege.
Wait, so this isn't just about feeling rejected or disappointed. They're saying the failure is seen as a kind of cosmic betrayal.
That's the core of it, yes. The ego is incredibly fragile, so any loss of that expected dominance is felt as blasphemy.
A theological crisis.
A theological crisis. And this is where sociologist Michael Kimmel's idea of aggrieved entitlement comes in. It's this fury that comes from feeling like your birthright is being stolen. So the violence becomes restorative. It's a way to reclaim that God complex by force.
And the report says this is all built on, 5 pillars of narrative conditioning? What are the main ones?
They highlight a couple of really key ones. First, there's myth number 1. White males are always the leader and the hero. And when reality doesn't match that cinematic promise, you get this profound dissonance.
Okay, and the other big one?
Myth number 4. White males are the most sexually desirable. The report connects this directly to the incel rage we see when that sexual access is denied.
And the case studies they use, like Elliot Rodger and Dylan Roof, really seem to illustrate that.
They do. It's the same underlying drive, just with different targets. You have Rodger, who literally called himself the closest thing to a living god and was punishing women. And then you have Dylan Roof, who saw himself as a kind of savior against this narrative of others taking over. It's the same mechanism and ego that demands total control.
So let's pivot to their critique then. Why exactly do they call focusing on mental illness and gun control lazy?
Okay, so on mental illness, they argue it's a privilege, a way to pathologize the individual and ignore the system.
So it frames them as a deviant.
Exactly, when their point is that the shooter is actually an overconformist to a toxic version of white masculinity. They're not breaking the rules, they're following them to their most violent conclusion.
And what about gun control?
The argument there is that focusing on the gun, the means, completely ignores the motivation. They see the firearm as just a totem of power, maybe a phallic substitute for that ego that's been wounded. So getting rid of the tool doesn't get rid of the impulse.
Which brings us to their solution. They link all of this back to what they call the original sin of American slavery.
Yes, they say this violence is the karmic interest on that unpaid debt.
So what's the fix they propose?
It's a very specific, structural one, a massive mandated transfer of wealth. Economic reparations. And this is key. It's targeted only at foundational Black Americans, or FBA. So the direct lineage-based descendants of the enslaved, and they explicitly exclude Black immigrants who arrived post-1965.
And the intended effect of this on the God complex, how does that work?
They call it the ultimate ego breaker. By structurally acknowledging a massive historical theft, reparations would shatter the illusion of white meritocracy. It forces the admission we are not gods, we are debtors.
So the idea is this is the only way to stop the cycle, a structural forfeiture.
That's the argument.
So the core takeaway for you, listening, is that this report isn't framing this as a problem of individual sick minds. It's about a systemic deformity built on stolen labor and maintained by these powerful cultural narratives.
Which leaves you with a really provocative question. If the economic solution they propose is that kind of structural change, what about the cultural side? What immediate narratives, those 5 pillars we talked about, can you start to challenge in your own life to help dismantle that complex?